which was supposed to be a calm, peaceful Saturday morning. The kind where you finally get to breathe after a long week. The sun was peeking through the oak trees, birds were chirping like they were performing a concert, and I, Evan Miller, was walking around the edges of my newly inherited property. My grandfather had passed away 6 months earlier, leaving me his land just outside the city, a few quiet acres that bordered a fancy new gated community called Maple Grove Estates. I wanted to see the exact boundaries before starting my plan to build a small lakeside cabin. It was my dream spot, calm, green, and far away from the chaos of city life. But peace doesn't last long when there's an HOA nearby. As I walked near the back fence line, I noticed a narrow paved walking path stretching out from the gated community into what I knew was part of my land. It was odd. I stopped, looked at my map, then the landmarkers, then back at the path. That's when it happened. A sharp, high-pitched voice sliced through the morning air like a siren. "Hey, you can't be here! This is private property." I turned, startled, and saw her, marching toward me in all her glory. Blonde bob haircut, oversized sunglasses, pink jogging outfit, clutching a tiny barking dog that looked more attitude than fur. She was storming down the looks empty. She turned and started walking back toward the gated entrance, muttering into her phone about trespassers and calling the police. I stood there for a moment, staring at the spot where she'd been. My peace was officially ruined. I had come out to enjoy nature, and instead ended up in a showdown with the self-proclaimed queen of Maple Grove. But something about her confidence didn't sit right with me. The way she'd said, "We know our boundaries," made me curious. My grandfather was meticulous with land paperwork, and I remembered him once mentioning a dispute with a developer years ago. Could it be that the HOA had built something on his property by mistake? I pulled out my phone, opened the county's property map app, and checked my coordinates. Sure enough, the spot I was standing on was inside my land but checked my coordinates. Sure enough, the spot I was standing on was inside my land boundary. My pulse quickened, not with fear, but with a strange mix of amusement and disbelief. Karen, as I was starting to mentally call her, had just screamed at the owner of the land she was standing on. It was almost too ironic. I took a few pictures of my own, of the walking path, the fence, the nearby playground just beyond it. If my suspicions were right, a part of that playground might even be built over my property line. As I walked back toward my truck, I could still hear her dog barking faintly in the distance, like a warning siren echoing through the trees. "Trespassing," she had said. I chuckled under my breath. If only she knew. What she thought was her land wasn't hers at all. And by the time I was done checking the county records, the truth would turn her world upside down. That morning started with peace and sunshine, but it was about to spiral into a storm of HOA drama, arrogance, and a shocking discovery that would make even the boldest Karen wish she'd kept her mouth shut. In Derry. My pulse quickened, not with fear, but with a strange mix of amusement and disbelief. Karen, as I was starting. Dash. The next morning, I couldn't get the incident out of my head. That woman, Karen, as I later learned her name was, had screamed at me like she was the sheriff of the neighborhood. The more I thought about it, the more it bothered me. I wasn't the kind of person to pick fights, but I also wasn't about to be falsely accused of trespassing on land that legally belonged to me. So after breakfast, I grabbed my folder of old property papers my grandfather left behind and drove straight to the county land records office. The place was quiet, the kind of old government building that smelled faintly of dust and printer ink. I approached the counter and explained my situation to the clerk, a friendly older man named Tom. "You're saying the HOA might have built something on your land?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Possibly," I replied, handing over my grandfather's deed. "I just want to confirm the property boundaries." Tom typed a few things into his computer, then pulled up a digital map on the screen. "Let's take a look here. Parcel 217, owned by Evan Miller. That's you?" I nodded. He zoomed in closer. "Parcel 217, owned by Evan Miller. That's you?" I nodded. He zoomed in closer, and my heart began to race as I recognized the area. There it was, the same wooded border where the HOA's walking trail and playground sat. "Now," Tom said, tracing the lines with his cursor, This darker outline here is your land. See this section here? He pointed to a patch that extended slightly into the HOA's side. That's technically part of your property. Looks like the HOA's trail and part of their recreational area overlap by about 20 feet. I leaned closer, shocked. You mean they actually built on my land? Tom nodded matter-of-factly. Yep. Seems like whoever developed that neighborhood didn't do their due diligence. It happens sometimes. Old boundaries get ignored or misread. I sat there stunned. For years, this HOA had been using my family's land without paying a dime for it, and now their president was screaming at me for trespassing? The irony was unbelievable. I asked Tom to print out the official survey and property map, along with the deed copy showing the legal description. He slid the papers across the counter, saying, "If they give you any trouble, this will shut my way home." I couldn't help but imagine my grandfather shaking his head with that knowing smile of his. He told me once that a developer tried to buy part of his land years ago, but never followed through with the paperwork. I told them if they don't sign it proper, he'd said, then it stays mine. I guess he meant it. By the time I got home, my curiosity had turned into determination. I spread the documents out across my kitchen table, comparing them with satellite images online. It was all there in black and white. The HOA's playground and a good chunk of their walking trail were built smack dab on my property. I even spotted what looked like part of their fencing running over the line. I sat back in my chair, exhaling slowly. So, I muttered to myself, the queen of the HOA's kingdom is sitting on my throne. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or be furious and inform them politely, but then I remembered how Karen had treated me. Her smug tone, her arrogance, her complete disregard for facts. She hadn't even given me a chance to explain before calling me a trespasser. No, I decided, I was going to handle this face-to-face, with proof in hand. That evening, I went back through my grandfather's old letters, hoping to find any mention of the developer or the land dispute. Sure enough, I found one note, yellowed with age, where he had scribbled in his rough handwriting, "They never paid. Built close to my line. Let the next generation deal with it if it becomes an issue." Well, Grandpa, I thought, I guess that time has come. I started printing out photos of the mistake was. By the time I was done, I had a neat folder labeled HO, a property dispute. As the sun went down, I sat by the window, watching the faint glow of the HOA's streetlights through the trees. I could hear distant laughter from kids playing near that same trail. It hit me then. Those kids were playing on my land, under a playground their parents' HOA didn't even legally own. The thought made me smirk. Tomorrow I decided I'd go out there again and place a few boundary markers, bright orange stakes that no one could ignore. Not to start a fight, but to make a point. If Karen wanted to scream about trespassing, then she was about to find out who was really trespassing. And when the truth came out, she wouldn't just owe me an apology, her entire could ignore. Not to start a fight, but to make a point. If Karen wanted to scream about trespassing, then she was about to find out who was really trespassing. And when the truth came out, she wouldn't just owe me an apology, her entire HOA would owe me compensation. My grandfather's land was about to make headlines in Maple Grove, and this time I was muffer, packed my measuring tape, survey map, and a handful of bright orange stakes into my truck and headed back to the property. The sky was clear, the air crisp, and I was determined to mark every inch that belonged to me. I parked near the edge of the woods and began hammering the first stake into the ground. The satisfying thunk of metal hitting soil echoed through the quiet morning. I took careful measurements, using the map from the county office to ensure every marker was precise. But just as I was driving the fourth stake into the ground, I heard the one sound I'd already learned to dread. A sharp, nasal voice cutting through the air like a knife. "You again? What did I tell you about trespassing?" I turned slowly, already knowing what, or rather, who, was coming. Karen, the self-appointed ruler of the HOA, was strutting down the trail in her bright pink tracksuit, sunglasses perched on her head, and that same yappy little dog bouncing beside her. This time, she wasn't alone. Two men followed close behind, both wearing polo shirts with Maple Grove HOA board embroidered on them. One carried a clipboard, and the other crossed his arms, clearly there to back her up. "Ma'am," I said calmly, I'm just marking my property line. You and I both section doesn't belong to your HOA. Her eyes widened like I'd insulted her entire bloodline. Excuse me? You're vandalizing our trail with those ugly sticks. Take them out right now before I call the police. I took a slow breath, trying not to laugh. Actually, these aren't vandalism. They mark where your HOA ends and my land begins. You're the ones who've been trespassing. She blinked as if the word trespassing was an alien concept when directed at her. Oh, really? She sneered. And where's your proof? I smiled. I'm glad you asked. I reached into my folder and handed her the county map, the official deed, and the survey printout. This is my property line, certified by the county. You can see your walking trail and playground extend onto my land. Right here. She snatched the papers and skimmed them for all of 3 seconds before bursting out laughing. You expect me to believe this? You could have printed no section doesn't belong to your HOA. Her eyes widened like I'd insulted her entire bloodline. Excuse me? You're vandalizing our trail with those ugly sticks. Take them out right now before I call the police. I took a slow breath, trying not to laugh. Actually, these aren't vandalism. They mark where your HOA ends and my land begins. You're the ones who've been trespassing. She blinked as if the word trespassing was an alien concept when directed at her. Oh, really? She sneered. And where's your proof? I smiled. I'm glad you asked. I reached into my folder and handed her the county map, the official deed, and the survey printout. This is my property line, certified by the county. You can see your walking trail and playground extend onto my land. Right here, she snatched the papers and skimmed them for all of 3 seconds before bursting out laughing. You expect me to believe this? You could have printed. The 2 men behind her leaned in to take a closer look. One of them, a tall man with graying hair, frowned slightly. Karen, he murmured, pointing at the map. This says the survey's from the county clerk's office. It looks official. Don't be ridiculous, she snapped, brushing him off. He's clearly mistaken. We've had this trail for years. It's ours, I raised an eyebrow. You might want to double-check that. The land's been in my family since the 1960s. The developer who built this neighborhood never bought this section. She glared at me like I'd just spoken blasphemy. You're lying. Our HOA lawyer will straighten this out. Good, I said, smiling calmly. Please do. I'll be waiting. That only made her angrier. She started taking pictures of me again, circling around like a paparazzi with a vendetta. We'll see how you like being vendetta. We'll see how you like being reported for harassment, she hissed. I didn't bother responding. I simply finished placing the last of my stakes, each one hammered firmly into the ground, bright orange against the green grass. A bold reminder that boundaries existed whether Karen liked them or not. As I packed up my tools, I could hear her muttering under her breath about entitled outsiders and people trying to steal HOA land. I just smiled. You know, Karen, I said before getting into my truck. Sometimes the loudest person is the one who's the most wrong. Her jaw dropped, but before she could fire back, I drove off. 2 days later, I received an email from an HOA attorney named Michael Grant. The subject line read, Property Overlap Concern, Maple Grove Estates. Inside, the message was short but polite. Mr. Miller, after reviewing your documents and conducting our own verification, it appears a section of the Maple Grove Communities, recreational dash. The HOA's lawyer reached out again the next day, this time asking to schedule a formal meeting to discuss potential resolutions. I agreed, curious to see how far they were willing to go. When I arrived at the Maple Grove Community Center that afternoon, the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Karen was there, of course, sitting at the head of the table like some kind of suburban monarch, arms folded and lips pursed tight. Beside her sat 2 other board members, the same men who'd been with her at the trail, and across from them was Michael Grant, the HOA's attorney. He stood up politely when I walked in. Mr. Miller, he said, shaking my hand, thank you for coming. We've reviewed the county records and, well, it appears there was a mistake made during the development of this neighborhood. Karen immediately cut in. A mistake? That can't be right. Our developer was very thorough. Michael gave her a patient look. Karen, we've verified the survey twice. The overlap is real. The HOA's walking path and part of the playground are built on Mr. Miller's property. Karen looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Her face turned red as she leaned forward. So what does this mean? She asked, her voice sharp. It means, I said calmly, that your HOA has I'm offering two options, I replied. Either the HOA purchases the section of land it's using, or you remove everything that's been built on it. Trail, fence, playground equipment, the works. Karen nearly jumped out of her chair. You can't be serious. That playground is for our children. You'd make them tear it down? If it's on my land, I said firmly, then yes. Unless you pay for it, Michael, the lawyer, tried to mediate. Perhaps we can agree on a fair market purchase? That's what I had in mind, I said. I've already had the area appraised. I slid a printed sheet across the table. Karen snatched it up and gasped. This is absurd. You're asking blackmail. It's property law, I said flatly. You can check with your lawyer. Michael sighed quietly. Technically, he's correct. For the next 30 minutes, Karen ranted, argued, and even tried to guilt-trip me. She threw out every emotional argument in the book. How the community needed that playground. How the kids would have nowhere to play. How I was being heartless. But I stayed calm, repeating one simple fact. Her HOA had built illegally on my family's land. I'm not the villain here, I said at one point. You made a mistake. I'm just giving you a chance to make it right. The lawyer nodded in agreement. If we go to court, it could get very expensive for the HOA, especially with removal costs. That silenced the room. Karen's glare could have melted steel. She finally hissed, Fine. We'll consider your offer. I stood up. You do that. But understand, if you delay too long, I'll be forced to take legal action. Then I walked out, leaving them in stunned silence. A week later, I got a call from Michael. Mr. Miller, he said, the HOA board voted to purchase the land at your asking price. They'd rather pay than tear anything down. I couldn't help but laugh. Smart decision. The paperwork was finalized over the next few weeks. When the deal closed, I received a hefty check. Far more than I'd expected. The HOA had essentially paid me a small fortune just to keep what they'd already built. The funniest part? Karen's signature was on the approval form. The same woman who accused me of trespassing had just authorized payment happened to be there, pruning flowers with her dog nearby. She looked up, immediately stiffening. Oh, it's you, she muttered. Congratulations on robbing an entire neighborhood. I smiled politely. Not robbery, Karen. Just business. Her cheeks flushed, and she turned away without another word. As I walked past the playground, I noticed a new sign at the corner. Community area, maintained with permission of adjacent property owner. I almost burst out laughing. She must have hated approving that. But deep down, I knew the lesson was worth more than the money. Entitlement doesn't equal ownership, and arrogance can't change the truth. That day, I left knowing I'd defended my grandfather's legacy and taught the HOA queen that sometimes for my land.